Um, I am Zeynep. I am a physics student in Middle East Technical University. At the preparation stage of this event, I was in the academics team to find academics for giving presentations. And for today, I'm your moderator. Let me briefly explain you. Here for giving a presentation called Could We Ever Learn an Alien Language, which we are very excited about. And please don't hesitate to ask your questions from the chat box throughout the presentation, because at the end, she will answer them as much as our time allows. And here we are on the very first day of Astrobiology Live Presentation series, starting with the presentation, Could We Ever Learn an Alien Language by Sheri Wells-Jensen. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeynep. And it's so good to be here with you. And I mean, it's terrible that we have a global pandemic, but it's kind of amazing and wonderful that I get to shoot across the ocean and present to you. Sometimes difficulties bring us marvelous new opportunities. And I'm just so glad to be with you from my small basement office in suburban Ohio, in Bowling Green, Ohio, in the United States. So thank you so much for all your hard work. Also, thank you for your studies. You guys are working on some of the most important questions that humanity has right now. There are many things we have to do as a planet to make sure that we survive. But as we're struggling to survive, one of the things we really want to know is, are we doing this all alone? Are we the only ones? And your work is going to be crucial to answering those questions. And that is one of the most basic questions humans have. And so I don't want you to become discouraged as you work, because we don't have any aliens yet. And we don't know if we're going to have aliens, right? We don't know. We just don't know. But it's such a big and important question that we have to be ready for it. We have to do the background research, and you guys are on the front lines of doing that. And I want to send you appreciation for all the hard work that you're doing. Sometimes when you're doing, working calculus problems, you might not remember that it's all because you want to answer these really big, important questions. So good job and hang in there. And while we're asking the little questions, so while we're answering questions like, is there oxygen in the atmosphere of this planet, however many, 50, 60, 1,000 light years away, however far we can reach, we have to ask those kind of questions. And then we have to ask questions about, could there be life there? And if that life is intelligent, would it speak? And if it does speak, could we ever understand it? One of the struggles that science fiction writers have all the time is how to represent something that's really alien. So, I mean, the things that scientists do, the things that we do in the hard sciences, like, is there oxygen on the other planet? Are there biological processes at work on those other planets? We're basically working with the same rules, right? Physics is the same everywhere. Chemistry is the same everywhere. That's what as we understand the universe, right? But thought, could we be sure that that's the same everywhere? And if it is not, I was going to say what on earth, but I guess that's the wrong way to put it. What could that possibly be like? So when we do, one of the playgrounds that we use for these ideas is science fiction. And a lot of times science fiction authors, in an attempt to tell a good story, just forget about the differences in thought and absolutely forget about the differences in language. Because who wants to sit for an hour and a half or 2 hours in the movie watching one group of people go, hello, hello, and the other group going, I mean, it's not good storytelling, right? Our good stories in literature and in science fiction start after we've understood each other's language. So, but as scientists, we want to make sure that we have a steady progression from, oh my goodness me, that appears to be an alien, it appears to be intelligent. We want to make sure we start there and then move to the kinds of stories that we tell one another and the kinds of interactions that we have as we meet friends, enemies, strangers, mentors, students, whoever we're going to meet on these in these other civilizations. So, language. Oh my gosh. So the first slide that's up is just my contact information and my hello. And thank you for running my slides for me. So I appreciate that. So let's go on to the next slide. So how do humans get language in the first place? That's where we have to start. Just like we had to start by studying physics and chemistry on our own planet, we have to study linguistics on our own planet. So where does language come from? And I'm really sad to say that we just really don't know. Why is it that we share so much DNA with chimpanzees and yet we talk and chimpanzees don't? Chimpanzees definitely communicate, right? They definitely have reasonably advanced cognition. We can, if you have a chimpanzee as a friend, which, you know, who does, but the people who have done that, you can communicate. I mean, I can communicate with my cat. I can communicate with a dog. We can train dogs and dolphins to do amazing things, but we can't sit down and say, so what'd you have for supper yesterday, dog? So, Mr. Chimpanzee, what's your name and where were you born? We can't have those kinds of conversations. They don't have the kind of language that we have. They definitely have communication, but you can't say to them, would you go over there and look under the couch, dig under the couch there, and I dropped the remote control for the TV. Could you get that? And on your way back, could you bring me a cup of coffee? You know, we just cannot do that with the other beings that we share this planet with. Language is something different than that. So please try, and I'm going to try not to give you all of linguistics here, right? But so you'll have to come with me on this trip a little bit. So please try to separate in your minds the idea of communication from the idea of language. Language is very specific and you can communicate your thoughts. So you can try to communicate with actions, but that's not the same as using language. So what we want to know is where language came from in the first place. So we've got a couple hypotheses, right? So one hypothesis is this: somewhere between 70 to 100,000 years ago, there was an abrupt mutation that allowed language. And it just, bam, it just happened, bam. One day, no language. One day, chimpanzees, you know, Homo sapiens walking around, gesturing, pointing at things. And then, bam, mutation, language. And presumably it had to happen, you know, to more than one person, or that there was a good trait, and so was very abruptly dominant and worked immediately. That is one of the live hypotheses that we have. This would explain a couple things. If we went from no language to language and just a boom is the mutation, one of the problems with that, if we look across planets, is how likely was that to happen? Are we the only one? I mean, a particular mutation is pretty doggone random. We were pretty lucky if that just happened. But it does explain a couple things. It explains how languages on Earth are all a little bit similar to each other. It does explain how everybody learns a language. So no matter where you are, as a little tiny cute baby, no matter where I pick you up from and what country I put you down in, you'll learn whatever language is there. It will take you roughly the same amount of time. There's nothing genetic about what language you learn, as you all know, because you're bilingual people, right? I have to explain this to American students because they think being bilingual is a very strange and amazing thing. 2/3 of the people on the planet are bilingual, but for Americans, we're like, "Oh, you speak another language! Wow, it's amazing." So I have to explain that to them. But it is kind of weird in many ways that every human being can learn a language, because as you know from doing it, it's hard, right? It's not an easy thing, but everybody just does it. So this abrupt mutation would explain why everybody seems to come equipped to learn language. So why is it that we all understand nouns and verbs? There are some kinds of genetic. There's a syndrome called Williams syndrome that seems to affect language acquisition, but it doesn't prevent it. It just gives you some interesting anomalies in your syntax. But so it is a strange thing. It's a strange thing that we have 7,000 languages and you could learn any one of them. And that there are some things that no languages on Earth do, and we'll get to that in a minute. So maybe the abrupt mutation hypothesis is reasonable. But here's the alternative, which I tend to favor, but I can't prove it. And nobody can prove this. So the other possibility is that language is nothing special, really. It comes from basic cognitive processes. So as we got smarter, as our brain size grew, as our power to analyze and categorize grew, we began slowly to connect certain, we began slowly to connect sounds. It could be gestures because there are signed languages, right? We began slowly to connect sounds with things and sounds with actions, not because we came programmed for that, but because there are things in the world and there are activities in the world, and we just started associating sounds with those. And then because we're humans and we make patterns, we developed language. And this is not a problem-free hypothesis either, right? So I get it, and it's easy to imagine, because you can train a dog to do this, right? You can train a dog to associate certain words with certain actions. You can train your dog, right? You can't. I'm a little bit worried that my cat is going to come in here. I can't tell my cat not to come in. But I can teach my cat the word for treat and the word for, fish. They do know those words. But just having words for things is not the same as having a whole language. And we don't really know how people made the jump from here's a word for tree, here's a word for rock, here's a word for throw, to the intricacies that we have that are language. We just don't know how it happened. But so you've got the two hypotheses, right? Maybe all languages are similar because of a genetic mutation that we share, but maybe all languages are similar because we have the same brains. Okay, and so here is why this matters. If you go to the next slide, please. Let's just, for a minute, forget about phonetics. I teach phonetics and I really like it, but we're going to forget about phonetics. But let me say these things about it first. So one of the things that we have to think about with a language is how you communicate it, what channel it goes on. So on Earth, we have two kinds of languages. We have spoken languages and we have signed languages. Signed languages are primarily used by people who are deaf, but not exclusively. Lots of hearing people sign. And a lot of us use spoken languages. And we're used to language proceeding at a certain speed, at maybe 120 to 180 words a minute. We're used to it being at a certain pitch. We're used to it having certain acoustic properties. And we're used to it being auditory. So what if there were a language, depending on on the aliens' bodies, there could be a language that is supersonic, right? Or we could use very low pitched utterances, kind of like elephants do, right? Our words could proceed very slowly. So if dolphins and whales have a language, their words might be much longer than ours. I think the story is still out with dolphins and whales. We don't have a good handle on what they do yet. We know it's really complicated. It's as complicated as human language, but we don't know yet quite what all it's about. So the phonetics of an alien language could be really different from ours if they, for example, don't have a mouth, or if they talk with a different biological organ than they eat with, which is gross that we eat and talk with the same orifice. I think that's disgusting. We talk, we breathe, we eat. It's a lot going on with one, hole in your face. It's a lot. And arguably it's a bad idea. But if the aliens have different physiology, then their language will sound different, or maybe it will be electrical pulses or chemical pulses. And if that's the case, then that's a whole other problem that we have to solve. But anyway, I didn't even really want to talk about phonetics because that problem, it strikes me as very solvable. Even if we need a machine to do it, that problem is solvable. The language structure is more of the problem. So here's the thing. If we come by language by a mutation, if it's not logical, if it's just, bam, we just had a mutation and that allowed language, we can't expect anyone else to share that ability because it's not logically determined. It came from just a random mutation. So if they do have language and they also had a random mutation that gave them language. So if it's we have a mutation, they have a mutation, we cannot expect necessarily to have any ability ever to understand their language. Not at all. But if language comes from a cognitive process, if we understand language because we live in the world, and because we manipulate objects and we have cognition that that allows us to talk about what we're doing, then we might expect to understand their language, right? If their language is based on their intellectual understanding of their environment, and if their environment is like our environment, then maybe we could. One hypothesis is that our language is very much influenced by what our bodies are shaped like. So the fact that we have that our senses are the way they are, and that we have 2 hands and 2 feet, and our brains are on top of our bodies, right, when we're moving around, gives us a certain way of thinking and interacting in the world. And if alien body structure is like our body structure, then that's more points toward the possibility that we would be able to understand them and that they would be able to understand us. And it has to do maybe with if they're humanoid, if their bodies are shaped like ours, then maybe we have a good chance of understanding them if our language comes from our cognition and our ability to comprehend our environment. So there's a great science fiction novel by Suzette Haden Elgin called Native Tongue. And one of her hypotheses, and it didn't start with her, but she does a really nice job of describing this, is that you could learn an alien language if the aliens were also humanoid, if they had the same basic body shape. But if they didn't, and you tried to understand it, your brain would literally explode. You try to expose your brain to a non-humanoid language and it would explode. And probably not, but it was kind of a cool idea. So the other possibilities exist, right? That we have a mutation that caused language and theirs came up through cognition. And the opposite is possible, that our language came up through cognition and theirs was a mutation. And the thing that makes me worry, the thing that makes me least happy about this is that it's possible that language learning would not be reciprocal. That, for example, they could learn our language, but we could never learn theirs. That just enrages me. I'm not signing up for that. That would be terrible. But the opposite is also true. Maybe we, because of some factor or other, could learn their language, but they could never learn ours. And maybe the other sort of nuanced part of that is that maybe only small children could learn their language, because we know that it's easy to learn a language when you're a small child, right? If your parents had, let's blame the parents, because that's what I do. I blame my parents. If our parents had brought us up to be bilingual, then we would effortlessly have learned 2 languages when we were little, and it was easy, and all we were doing was playing and having a nice time, and language just happened to us like it does to small children. I mean, you can see them hypothesis testing. You can see small children learning, but they don't sit around and go, oh, I got to memorize this list of verbs. Oh, I just knocked things off my desk. Okay, whatever that was, it can just be on the floor. We don't do that, right? We don't work at it when we're little. Okay, so, hi, Kitty. My cat is joining me now. That's nice. Okay, let's hit the next slide. So what we want to know then is, okay, so where does language come from? How different is one language from another? One of the questions we can ask is not when did language start or how, but how many times did language begin? So in biology, we're always looking for how many genesis of life are there on a planet, right? And so for Earth, if one of the reasons to look for life on Mars and life on some of the moons of Jupiter and maybe the moon of and maybe Saturn, maybe one of the moons of Saturn or 2. One of the reasons, or Venus, right, to look in the clouds of Venus for signs of life. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. One of the reasons to do that is to find out how easy it is for life to start. Did life begin more than once in our solar system? And so we can, because if it began more than once, then we know that life is easy and life can just happen. And would that be amazing? So the same question is we can ask about language. How many times did language begin on Earth? And there are several possible answers to that question. We have about 7,000 languages spoken on Earth today. And that always delights me, that number, because it's so big. It is going down rapidly, unfortunately, but right now, something like 7,000 languages. It's pretty amazing. So, I mean, it could be that each of those languages started separately 70,000 years ago, but that is really not likely, because some languages clearly are descended from others. So many of the European languages are descended from one source and just changed over time. So probably not 7,000 times. We could hypothesize that maybe there's about 350 starts to language, so about 220 from each language family. And then maybe there are about 120 languages on Earth that don't seem to be related to any other language. That doesn't mean they're super strange. It just means that we can't figure out which language they're related to. And that also seems unlikely to me, because even though we can't figure out how these languages are related, they're not that strange, right? They're not that unusual. Could be some smaller number, maybe 12. Just pick a number at random. Or maybe there was one time when languages started on Earth. We call it proto-world. That there was one, just like maybe there was only one place that life started. Maybe there was only one place that language started. And maybe all the languages of the world are descended from one mother language. And if that's true, it might mean that it's hard to start language, that it's a difficult process, just like it's hard to start life. And we don't know, we can't tell. We've looked across languages for similarities, but at a minimum, language started 70,000 years ago, right? So it's had lots of time to change and to spread out, and for individual languages to evolve and get different from each other. But if language started with cognition, it could be 1 million years old. And then it had even more time to change, right? So there's a lot of unknowns in linguistics, right? And I need a time machine really, really badly so I can travel back in time and answer these questions, because we can't tell from what we have in existence today. If you hit the next slide, please. So why don't we know this enrages me. I've been a linguist for years, and I thought I would know some of these things by now, and I don't, because linguistics is a young science, much younger than physics and chemistry and biology. And we don't have our data are not retrievable. We don't have fossils. The best thing that linguists have is stuff that people wrote down. So our history, everything we know, goes back only 5,000 years. And there's not much that we have even that goes back that far. So language changes so quickly. In one generation, we can still understand one another. I can still understand my children, thankfully. But in 400 years, it's hard to understand. So if I look back at the English of Shakespeare, I don't know if you guys have had to do that in your English studies. It's difficult. You know, it's like, yeah, I kind of know, I get it. I sort of know what you're talking about, but I need some additional notes. If I go back 700 years to Chaucer and some of the early writings, and again, I'm talking about English here because that's the data that most of us have, I struggle if I'm reading something written in the 1400s in presumably English. I don't know. And if I go back 1,000 years, it's absolutely not intelligible to me. So in 1,000 years, which in real time, in the time that we talk about physics and evolution and biology, 1,000 years is nothing. 1,000 years is bam, it's over. But within 1,000 years, which on the galactic scale is a blink of an eye, it's nothing. Our language changes profoundly. We don't know what the effect of modern technology is on that, whether language change is going to speed up because we can all talk to one another now, or whether it's going to slow way down because we have recordings and records. We don't know. This experiment that we're running on ourselves, we don't know how it's going to work out. We have no idea. But one of the problems that we're going to have in communicating with other civilizations is this language change problem. So we have sent a few messages into outer space deliberately at the speed of light. Our first deliberate message was the Arecibo message in the 1970s, which has only been going for 50 years. So it's only 50 light years away if the signal has survived that long, which maybe it hasn't. But we don't necessarily expect that another civilization will be that close. So if we have to send a message at the speed of light 200 light years away, it's going to get there in 200 years. They're going to think about it and then send an answer. And so at minimum, the answer is going to come back 400 years from when we sent it. This is a bad problem for us because we might not be able to understand what we originally sent. So one of the things that means is this: if we're going to send messages into outer space at the speed of light, which is slow, we're going to have to pay attention to, we're going to have to keep some kind of record and go back and keep looking at them because we're going to forget what we sent and we're not even going to understand what we sent ourselves. Get the next slide, please. So what do we know about languages anyway? So here's, let me look at my time. How am I doing here? Okay. Okay. What do we know about Earth languages? And again, any of these things, if you switch out, like if you think of these things as binary switches, yes, no switches. If you change one of these switches, it profoundly changes what language is like. So these are things that all Earth languages do. But if alien languages don't, then it dramatically increases the difficulty in learning that language. So all Earth languages are socially transmitted. That means that we're not born with them. Whether or not we are pre-programmed to learn a language or not, we still have to learn the words, right? We still have to learn if the word is su or if the word is water, if the word is ekmek or the word is bread, right? We still have to learn those differences. But if you're born with all the words in you already hardwired into you somehow, which is not what we do, But if the aliens do that, that would make it really difficult, right, for us to acquire that. Um, it would make it difficult for us to acquire their language, and maybe they would never acquire ours if they're like, wait, what do you mean I have to learn these words? I can't learn words. Learning words is not a thing I can do. And if you were born with all the words already installed, maybe you would never be able to learn a language. So they would never be able to learn our language. I don't know. And maybe if the words that they learned that came pre-programmed for them were really complicated, maybe we could never learn their words. Language is changing over time. We talked about that. So if their language doesn't change over time, that would be useful in terms of messaging between stars. But it's not what we would expect. Icelandic is a language on Earth that has not changed much over time, but we don't really know why that is. It's not got to do with isolation because A, they're not that isolated, and B, other communities have been isolated and their language still changes. So I don't know why that, nobody knows. Let's see, a couple other things on this slide. So language is hierarchically structured, which means that you can, if you start with a story, you can break it into sentences. You can break those sentences into words. You can break those words into meaningful bits. So if I have a word like in Turkish, if I say elden from a hand, that there's el, the hand part of the word, and then there's den, the suffix that means from. And so you can break words into those parts, and then you can break those parts into individual sounds. And that's true of all Earth languages. It'd be hard to imagine a language that wasn't like that, but it's possible. Earth languages have anywhere between 12 and 100 sounds in them. So a language like Hawaiian, beautiful, beautiful Hawaiian, has only 12. It's got like, 8 consonants and 5 vowels, so 11 sounds. Beautiful little thing. Up to languages like Hindi or other languages, they have 100 sounds. They could have more, which would make it harder to learn. They could have less, which would make their words much, much longer. So a Hawaiian word is longer than a Turkish word or an English word because they have fewer sounds to pick from. So just in an information processing perspective, if you've only, that binary numbers are longer than hexadecimal numbers, right? Because they have to be. So how many consonants and vowels you have in your language affects how long your words are. Let's see. Yeah. I'm going to skip a couple of these because I want to be mindful of my time. We all label objects. We have about somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 words, which is a great big giant variation. So like if you look in people say stupid things about English all the time, like how it's got millions of words. Not really. If you look in the Oxford English Dictionary, there are a lot of words we don't use anymore. And if you count all the chemical names as separate words, I don't know, you artificially inflate the number of words, whatever. English isn't that cool. But 10,000 words is pretty much what you need to communicate what you need to communicate, because you can rearrange those in combinations. But if they have more, if they actually have 5 million words that they use on a daily basis, so if they cut their words into finer semantic shades than I do, like what if I can describe my desk in a sentence, but what if I had to memorize 50 words for 50 different shapes of desks? And if I had to do that for every object in my home, that would be a lot, and I don't know if I could do it. The link between the sound that we make for a word and the meaning of that word is arbitrary across all human languages. There are some things like onomatopoeia, where the word sounds like it's like the thing, like a word like buzz sounds like a buzz, and the words for animal noises sound like those animals, presumably. But mostly the link is arbitrary. So if the link is not arbitrary, one of the things that would mean is that aliens only have one language on their planet, right? If the link between the word and the thing the word refers to can only be one kind of way. Whereas on Earth, the link between the sound of a word and that word is completely arbitrary. So I could have any number of words for dog, right, in different languages. And that sound of that word can be different. I can make new words up all the time. I don't know what would happen if they can't do that. That would mean if they had a new idea, they would struggle with it. I can predicate, which means I can take nouns and verbs and put them together. And I can take nouns and describe them with adjectives. This is one of the things that I think is essential for language. We have to be able to use words to describe each other and use words recursively and interactively so that I can make a sentence about my cat. I don't have to just say cat. I can say my angry cat. And I can say my angry cat fights with my other cat. And all of that is because I can combine ideas in languages. Again, I don't need to go over all these with you, but some of them I think are cool. Like all languages, even if you don't mark number on the nouns, all languages have a way of saying one thing or more than one thing. Even though some languages don't have complex counting systems, as in they can just say 1, 2, many. They don't have words for 3, 4, 5. All languages have some way of differentiating between one thing and many things. Again, I can't imagine what an alien civilization would be like if they cannot do that. I can't imagine how they would have technology if they cannot do that. But again, we don't want to discard those ideas. All Earth languages have some ways of talking about time, but not too many ways. There are languages with words for the near future and the distant future, and the near past and the distant past. But there are no languages that have a separate word for 3 days from now or 3.5 days from now. And again, this is just a problem of number of distinctions, right? So if a language has lots and lots and lots of distinctions about tense, maybe we could never learn that. I'm going to skip that content function word thing. Hi, kitty. Here's my cat. She's coming around. In all languages, we have rules about how to greet one another, and usually those don't mean anything. So when I greet you and I say hello, that doesn't really mean anything. We generally don't start a conversation. Hi, kitty, go away. We generally don't start a conversation. Well, okay, so the two things that people say to each other now are hello and did you get my message, right? That's becoming a greeting. But the kinds of information that we convey to one another when we begin to speak, these rules about language interaction are built into us. So we do not, for example, greet one another with, do you have to go to the bathroom? Or with information about how badly we have to go to the bathroom. That's not a thing we talk about, right, in polite conversation. But other civilizations could have profoundly different rules for what's appropriate to communicate when you greet. And that could make language learning difficult or just culturally really hard for us. Right? And all languages have ways of asking questions. All languages have ways of giving commands. Imagine a language where you don't have the ability to give a command. I don't know. Could that work? Would you just have to be really polite about it all the time? How would they get by without that? And all languages have ways of negating. Hit the next slide, please. So there are a couple languages that do cool things. 25 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna try to slip through the rest of this kind of quickly because I want to make sure we have times for questions. So there are a couple languages that do cool things that not all languages do. For example, we have in English and in Turkish, we have things like left and right. But some languages actually have, instead of left and right, they use compass directions. And I promise they really do this, and they really keep track of it all the time. So I would not say my camera is in front of me and my couch is behind me with my cat, and my cat is behind me. I would say my camera is to the east of me and my couch is to the west of me, and my cat is now walking to the south of me, and the door to the rest of my house is to the north of me. And even when I go upstairs, I would not forget those. I know, Kitty, it's exciting. Um, so, and again, I'm skipping a few things here. So another thing that very few Earth languages do is when you have a sentence with a direct object in it. So like, my cat eats her dinner. Her dinner in English goes at the end of the sentence. And in Turkish, her dinner goes in the middle of the sentence. I would say my cat, her dinner eats, right? But it's possible that there could be languages where the object comes first. Her dinner comes at the beginning of the sentence. There are very few languages that do that. Klingon actually does that, the invented language Klingon. And the reason it does that is so that all the linguists in the room would go, ha ha, yes, yes, that's very funny. You made an object initial language. Aren't you clever? Ha ha. That's why you did that. It's fun. I like Klingon. So again, next slide, please. There are some things that no Earth languages do, but they could do. And these are when people create languages for books or movies, they like to play with stuff like this, right? So no language on Earth has an obligatory system where you have, every time you say a noun, you have to say also if you like it or not, or you have to say if it's good, or if it weighs a lot, or what color it is, or how old it is, or if you can eat it or not. And so it's possible that alien languages would have these markings on them that we don't have. You could have different verbs that you only use on different days of the week. No language does this, but it could, right? And we could still learn that. You could have languages with some kinds of different tenses. So I could have a word that means exactly 36 days from now, if that were culturally important. I could learn that, right? You could, in fact, negate a word by pronouncing it backward, which I think would be really fun, and I think we should do, but nobody does. Okay, next slide, please. I think this is my last slide. Okay, so I'm going to skip the center embedding one because that's hard to do if you're not. I invite you to look at that, and obviously, you can come back to these slides. But we have cognitive limitations. So we cannot, for example, without stopping to figure it out, make a sentence and have the last word of the sentence be a counting of the number of words that we just uttered. I have no idea. I just said a sentence. I have no idea. I have to go, I have no idea. Okay, that was four. So I cannot cognitively go, I have no idea. 4. That was a good sentence. That was a good sentence. 5. That was a good sentence. 5. I cannot do that. My brain cannot do it. So if that were necessary in a language, I don't think I could ever learn it. I don't think humans could ever learn to do that. So if the aliens do that with their language, we could not do it. Our brains could not do it. We would have to have a computer to translate the languages for us. I cannot absorb different kinds of input on 2 different channels. So it is possible to sign, to use American Sign Language or one of the other signed languages and speak at the same time if you're saying the same thing. But I cannot continually speak one channel of information and convey a separate channel of information while I'm signing. I can't speak 2 languages and say 2 different things at the same time. If aliens do that, we are out of luck. Again, we need computers to do it. So other things that don't even strike me as possible. You could have a language that when you say a word, it is removed from your brain. Like you only get to say this word once in your life, which I think is a great science fiction idea. But again, it's not a thing that we could do. We also don't have a situation where we have to ration our language. Even if you're a shy person and you don't like to talk, you can talk as much as you want, right? There's no system where you just, out of words, no more words today, done. For us, we'd have to stop calling it language if we did something like that. Or if, like in the movie Arrival, if learning another language changes your brain, that's not possible from our definition of from what language we have, right? If the aliens have a language that you learn it and it changes their brains, that's not language as I understand it. That's something else. And could we ever learn that? I doubt it. I doubt it. So, so to wrap up here, to close, the question of can we learn their language depends a lot, I think, on what their bodies are shaped like. Are they humanoid? If so, then maybe. And also, what are their brains like at the neurological level? How do they process information? Is it anything like how we process information? Do they have more than one brain? And are they more like an octopus where they have lots of sort of freely acting parts of themselves? So it depends on what their brains are like. It depends on where their language came from, whether it's natural cognition or whether it is some kind of strange once in a lifetime, once in the species lifetime mutation. So it might be the case that we need computer assistants to learn their language. It might be the case that language learning is not reciprocal, like we could learn theirs and they could not learn ours, or it could be the other way around. Okay, I've been talking a lot, and so I'm going to stop and see if y'all have questions. This idea of learning languages it feels premature. We don't even know if there's aliens out there yet, right? We don't know if other civilizations even exist. But we have to start asking these questions now because we need to do some preparatory work, right? We need to start thinking about how we would learn a language so that when another language appears to us, we're not startled by that, like it's a whole new idea. So just like we need to do the preparation in physics and biology and astronomy and chemistry, we also have to do some of this work linguistically before we detect another civilization. So thank you so much for your time. I feel like I've been, I have been talking without interruption for a long time. So I'm delighted to take your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This was delightful. If you're ready, I will read you the questions right now.
I'm ready.
Okay, let me start with the first one. If there are intelligent life out there, is there any possibility that we have very different emotions, psychology, or same with us?
Yeah, that's a good question. So how do we know what they feel? Like, okay, so here's the thing. Things we have in common, probably they die. Probably. We know we die, right? Do they still die or are they beyond that? Have they moved into, if they are machines now, because we're still a very young race, right? If they are machines and not people, maybe they don't die. But if they're still biologically based and they die, then we have that, we probably have those emotions in common. I think everybody who's alive wants to stay alive. Yeah, I think that's probably necessary. This is such a good question. So I think everyone who's alive wants to stay alive. So we have that emotion in common. I think that it depends on if they have a sense of individuality. And if they do, which, yeah, I don't know. But if they do, then it's inevitable that there are things they want that they don't get. And even if they don't, even if they're not individuals, right? There are things that they want that they don't get. And I feel like that's going to be universal. So they'll have that, whether they feel sad or angry about that. I don't know how that would be, but I think just like we have, this is such a good question. Just like we have chemistry and physics and biology in common, we also have a couple things in common. Like we get things and we want them, That's how evolution works, right? We get a good thing and it helps us survive. And I think evolutionarily, we will all appreciate that, and we will all not like things that hurt us or try to kill us. So I think we'll have some of those things in common. But and like, so we are still in the grips of evolution, which probably explains jealousy, right? That I need my partner to be faithful to me and not to anybody else. And that seems very like a product of evolution to me, right? So if they are also a product of evolution, then they might feel the same kinds of things. They might feel the same kinds of protection of their children and anger, or affection for their children and anger at someone that tries to hurt them or their children. But if they have gone to a place where they're building themselves and designing themselves, then I think all bets are off. So I don't know, but I think the younger the race is, the younger the species is, the more likely they are to still be in the throes of evolution, and the more likely they are to be similar to us. And maybe even if they're not, maybe they'll remember what it's like to be us. And so, at least historically, they will be able to say, harken back, remember back in the old days, millions of years ago, when we were jealous and angry too? Yeah, humans do that.
Okay, thank you. And the second question, I read an article which is about the language can change our time perception. If we learn the language of an alien species who can perceive the fourth dimension, is it possible to perceive for us too?
I don't think so. Not with our brains. I mean, you can, I mean, you know from being bilingual that you feel a little different about things when you speak a different language, right? It feels just a little bit different. And some things you want to say in one language and some things you want to say in another language, but they're subtle things. Like you don't, no matter which language on earth you choose, you don't, it doesn't change physics to learn a language. And it doesn't really change your perception of everything. So that's a big question in philosophy. So one of my favorite examples is that in English, you say, I dropped it when you drop something. In Spanish, you say, se me cayó, which means it fell from me, literally. And so do Spanish speakers feel less responsible when they drop something? Not really. Not really. We tend to, our environment is really important in terms of how we perceive things. And so while changing your language can change things about what you remember and about how you categorize things, it, as far as we know, in the 7,000 languages we have, there are no people who really think differently than we do. So unless their language is brain surgery and not language, I doubt it, which makes me a little bit sad because it'd be cool if it were true. But probably if you have a thing that changes your deep perceptions of reality, probably that's chemical and not linguistic.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is, I'm curious about your opinion on the movie Arrival. Did you find it realistic?
I love the movie so much. I love it. I want them to come in the helicopter and pick me up and take me when the aliens come. Please, can you hear me, please? Okay, so the way that they did the language study was very realistic. The way that they learned the language, and really they learned the writing system, but whatever, no big deal. That's not that difference is not super important. So the way that she went out and tried to teach them the language is exactly how we do field work. That was exactly correct. The things they got wrong, they got two things wrong. One thing wrong was that they had to shorten the time frame and it looked really easy. Like, words, more words. Good. She was on it. It took, less than an hour and she was cruising. So that's one thing that they got wrong. But I mean, they had to, right? That's not really something they did wrong. That's just movies. right? But that thing where it changed the way that she perceived reality, no, I don't think so. That's why it's a science fiction story. Unless, the only way that could have happened is while she was learning new words, they also had some kind of, radiation affecting her brain or something. It wasn't just the twisting of her thoughts. Because, okay, and maybe I shouldn't give this example, but I'm going to. You can get really, really drunk or really high or do bad drugs and feel like, whoa, my world is inside out. You can have a very bad chemical trip. But when you come back, you still speak your language, right? You remember having a weird experience, but down is still down and up is still up, and yesterday is still in the past. So, so that's not it, right? You can't just take a language and make your world change. If you want your world to change dramatically, you have to ingest something. Not recommended, but that's what you have to do.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, we think with our words. If word does not exist, how people could ever think? So my question is, did we first learn how to think or how to talk? Which one evolved first?
That's such a good question. Okay, so wait. The first thing is that there are people who don't think in words, right? Some folk on the autism spectrum really think in pictures. They just really do. Like in my head, there are words all day long. Words. Like I talk to myself in my head when I'm not talking out loud to myself. And so for me, my reality is constructed around language. I think in words all the time. But that's not how creativity works. Like those of you who are also artists, right? You don't think in a logical progression when you're making something. When I'm playing music, I'm in a couple bands. And when I'm making a new song, I don't think in words, right? I think I don't know what it is. I think in thoughts, right? There's some other process going on. And even when I'm doing math, it's not words, right? When I'm doing math, it's math. When I'm trying to solve a problem, if I'm trying to solve a puzzle, I don't use words. When I'm doing a jigsaw puzzle, I don't use words. So we have some ideas about how language changes your cognition a little bit, right? So when you learn to count, you understand counting in a different way. There's the two hypotheses about the mutation and the cognitive development. So one of the ideas is that the mutation that caused the possibility of language also simultaneously caused the ability to think more abstractly. I'm not sure that I buy that. So I think that to have a new idea, it doesn't come from language, right? You don't talk yourself into a new idea. A new idea comes and then you put words in it. But words do help you structure some of the finer aspects of your thinking. But still, that moment of intuition, that moment of understanding is not linguistic, right? That's something else. So you also have people that are pretty doggone smart who don't have language, right? Every once in a while you find a person who is deaf who never learned sign language, right? So their world is not a linguistic world. But those people have relationships. They can do math, right? There are stories of people who have no language because they were never exposed to language, who lead complicated social lives and solve problems. So I think that it's a both and situation. So you can have cool ideas and innovate and learn new things without language. Otherwise, babies would get nowhere, right? Babies learn things before they have words for them. But language helps you structure those ideas and definitely has helped us with some of our communication of technology to one another. Like I can explain to you in words how to build a radio telescope, and I need those words to do that, to bring my idea to you. But the intuitions that are behind scientific discoveries are not linguistic. So yes and no is my answer to that question.
Thank you. The other one, can we predict trends in xenolinguistics by considering contextual reasons? For example, how would a life form from a planet that has no nights define time linguistically?
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think what we have to do is we have to run simulations. We have to tell stories. It's really important to make art and tell stories. So if you have a planet where they never see the sky, maybe they're on Europa and they're under, 6 feet of ice all the time in their ocean world. What is their world like? I mean, I think we have to do our best to try to put ourselves in those situations and imagine what it's going to be like. And then we have to agree with ourselves that we could be completely wrong, right? But our job now is to break all of our assumptions. Our job now is to think of a thing, try to imagine what it's like, and go, yeah, but what if that's not it? Let's try it again, let's try it again, let's try it again. And we have to imagine all the scenarios we possibly can so that we're more ready. So that when we do get the alien transmission or we do make first contact in some way, that we're not so surprised that we've never thought of these things before. We have to keep telling the good stories about languages on other planets and keep imagining. So what would a civilization be like if they could never see? If all the aliens were blind, and they were so blind that there was not even a word for seeing because no one had ever seen before. Like the whole electromagnetic visible light, irrelevant to their scientific development. What would their technology be like? This is one of my favorite thought experiments, right? So we could trace through how they would do physics, how they would do astronomy eventually. Astronomy wouldn't come first like it did for us. So our job now is to tell all these stories and to imagine all the possibilities. And every time you come upon a problem in biology or physics or chemistry, think, okay, this is how I discovered this. This is how we do it. Given that the facts, the biological and physical and chemical facts are the same, how could I have discovered this differently, or how could I think about it in a different way if I were an alien? You have to practice aliens all day long.
Thank you. The other one is, where do you see future of linguistics in astrobiology? What do you suggest for someone who is studying language and interested in astrobiology?
Oh, that's a really good question. So first off, you should be in contact with me and I can help you. But also, okay, real talk now. If you guys are planning to go on to graduate school, right, to do linguistics or biology or chemistry or whatever you're going to do, if you want, so practically as a profession, you should, if you're a linguist, not study alien languages as your first thing. Because every time I get on an airplane and I'm flying somewhere and someone says, what do you do? And I say, well, one of the things I do is I study the possibility of alien language. They giggle. They think that's funny. They think it's ridiculous, right? Like, oh, aren't you? You're so cute. And you do not want, as a young professional, to be seen as so cute. You need to be seen as a serious person. So although it's important work, you should also have something else that you're doing, so that you don't put all your hope in that one, you don't put all your eggs in that basket, right? But you should be involved with METI International, Messaging Extraterrestrial Intelligence International. You should be involved with SOCIA, the social and conceptual issues in astrobiology. You should be involved with anyone in anthropology who's also doing similar work. So there are organizations that you can be involved with. We don't have like our own journals. There are some journals that publish linguistic and social stuff about astrobiology, but there's no journal that's its only thing. So again, joining those organizations like METI and SOCIA will be super important for you if you're interested in doing social and linguistic stuff and astrobiology. You need your people, you need your groups, because right now it's not enough of a standalone science to support your career. And I say that with some regret, because I wish it were, but it's not, because we don't have alien languages yet, so people don't think we have to study them. They're wrong. We do have to study these things. We do have to ask these questions and make these hypotheses. But to support a whole person in a whole career, probably not yet. So make sure that is one of your interests, not your only interest.
Thank you so much. And the other question is, Golden Record of Voyager 1 includes some sentences from many languages of humanity. Which language will be the first one to be understood? Or will aliens really figure it out that there are different languages?
Oh, that's such a good question. Okay, so the golden record on the Voyager probe is one of my favorite things. It's beautiful. I mean, if you can go online and you can find everything that's on it. You can listen to the sounds. But to be honest, and Carl Sagan, who put that together, who is one of my heroes, just a beautiful human. He understood that the golden record is really a message to ourselves. It's about us, to us. We constructed it thinking about us, right? And there's only about 59 languages or so on the record out of 7,000. Okay. Response one, there's no way on Earth that they're ever going to understand most of that. Really at all. Like, it doesn't even, like, how do they know which parts of that are language and which parts of that are music? I mean, you can sort of tell the music is patterned differently, but there's a lot of weird stuff on that golden record. There's like the sound of a motor. I mean, there's weird stuff on there, just weird stuff. But it's beautiful. It's like a poem. It's more poetry than communication. Okay, that said, random stuff, we sent it out. It's so beautiful and it's so brave of us, and it's such a lovely thing to have done. Probably completely incomprehensible to aliens, except what if they have a science of extraterrestrial sociology and anthropology? So they pick up our little probe. I mean, okay, odds of picking up that little probe, very, very low, unless they specifically have a plan for picking up little probes from civilizations like ours. Yeah, okay. So they pick it up, and maybe they have a science of first contact. This is a Carl Sagan idea, right? And they're like, oh, look at this. It's a cute little probe. Huh. Okay, this is like a type 2 civilization. They clearly are pretty primitive, but look, they did this cool thing. They put together this cute probe. These must be, that must be language, because that's what primitive civilizations do. We've contacted thousands of them. We kind of know what that's like. So you have to understand that we are very young. We're just babies. We are interplanetary babies. We're just kind of we're doing the equivalent of communication. We're just kind of like, da, 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 da. And we're trying to communicate, but we don't have much. But adults, civilizations that have been around for millions of years, as opposed to our, 10,000 years of what you could call civilization. I don't know. They might be practiced at understanding civilizations like us, and they would be the adult to our toddler. And they might be able to understand things that we're trying to say, just like you can talk to a little tiny 2-year-old and understand that she wants her teddy bear, even if she cannot say, excuse me, would you please fetch my comfort object for me? I would much appreciate it. Thank you so much. So we can maybe hope that they have a science of first contact, and in that case they would be able to understand us, and they would get it, like, oh, look, they still have many languages on their planet. Isn't that cute? But without that, yeah, I don't know. Probably it's gibberish.
Thank you. The next question is, how about the probability of being sent from space according to a theory?
I'm sorry, could you ask that again?
Sure. How about the probability of being sent from space according to a theory?
Things sent from space, like you mean like interplanetary probes and things?
I think it's something like the probability of we sent from space before we become this.
Oh, I see. Like the possibility that we're not from Earth. Oh yeah, could be, right? How do we know? We don't know. I mean, we've clearly been here a while, right? Because we have fossil records that go back and back and back and back. But whether life on Earth, I mean, that's one of y'all's questions, right? That's a science question. That's a biology / physics / astronomy question. So, did a little meteorite from another planet, crash onto young Earth and drop a few drop the important chemicals here, drop the important spark of life here, or did it develop here? I don't know. And maybe we may or may not ever find out. I think we will find that out, right? I think we can, because even if there are other civilizations out there, we will eventually make it to other stars if we don't kill ourselves, and then maybe we'd know.
Maybe one day. Thank you so much. That was all. It was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun. You guys ask really good questions. I just really want to encourage all of you, because it's hard right now, especially. I mean, everything you do is harder than it used to be, right? At this conference, the people the folks, you guys who put the team that put this together, just really good for you. And it's not easy what you're doing. And it's not easy, honestly, right now to even study. Like, what is your attention span like? If you're like me, your attention span is nothing, right? And you're struggling and you're scared for people and you're scared for yourselves. And it's a really hard time. And I want to thank you for your time and attention. And I just want to encourage you to keep going, because we'll get through this. Humanity has gotten through terrible pandemics before, and it's painful and it's scary, but we're doing it. And I just want to thank you for your time and energy, and remind you that when you're doing your studying, it matters, and what you're doing matters. And getting together like this and being hopeful and studying in the face of this pandemic, what you're doing is really important and it matters. And if I can be helpful to any of you, my email address is on my first slide. I would be delighted to help out in any way I can.
Thank you so much again. At the beginning of our broadcast, Metin had and it's yours, Metin.
Thank you, Zeynep. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I want to start with mentioning the earthquake which happened in Izmir, and we would like to express our deepest condolences to the people of Izmir and Turkey, and let you know that our thoughts are with you. Words fall short of expressing our sorrow for our losses, and to those who are injured, we hope you get well soon. Let me introduce myself. My name is Metin Aran. I was one of the 4 coordinators who started this conference, and I was a member of the coordination committee in the following 2 years. This year, I'm the senior advisor of this conference, and it is such a great honor. When we started this organization 4 years ago as a group of undergraduate students, I never thought we could become an international science conference in just 4 years. And this happened thanks to our team. They have put amazing effort over the years, and they still work with passion, and I'm so proud of them. I'm here today just to represent the great teamwork behind this conference. Astrobiology is a fascinating area of research, and there are many young scientists who want to study on this area. We organized the first ever astrobiology conference, which took place in Turkey. And the reason we worked so hard over the years to create a place where these young scientists can come together with researchers all around the world. A place where people can listen, learn, talk, and get to know each other. A place where young scientists can present their studies to other scientists. I'm so proud to say that we have achieved this goal and we will continue to work to make this organization even bigger. As we all know, due to the new coronavirus pandemic, it's not possible to come together and meet in a conference hall. However, we could not keep ourselves from organizing the first ever Astrobiology Live series. And we know it's not ideal to have a scientific conference online, but we did our best to make this a pleasant experience for all of us. And we cannot wait to come together in person again as soon as possible. I would like to let Zeynep, our moderator for today, to continue with our talk. Thank you all again for joining us today, and I hope to see you soon. Stage is yours, Zeynep.
Thank you, Metin. So this was the end of the first day of Astrobiology Live Presentation series. Thank you all for being here today. Our next event will be held on next Saturday. Till then, you can follow us from our social media and give us any comments and ask questions. Thank you so much again. Hope to see you next week. Stay safe.